Throughout the history of sports, some players have crossed the line of the ordinary and entered the realm of the unforgettable. Their achievements defied statistics, impressed even the most skeptical critics, and marked generations. They seemed unbeatable, as if they had discovered a secret formula for absolute success. But when you look at what happened to many of these names after they reached their peak, a shadow forms behind the spotlight. Sudden tragedies, strange behavior, inexplicable decisions, and in certain cases, deaths that were never fully understood. There is a dark theory that connects these events not to chance, but to a hidden price. A pact, according to some occult scholars, sealed in exchange for glory. The clues would be everywhere, in the dates, the symbols, the places, and the words spoken throughout these athletes' careers. Nothing would be coincidence. But how far does this theory go? Is it just coincidence? Or is there something greater guiding the fate of basketball's greatest legends? Welcome to another night where mysteries never sleep. I'm Midnight, and this is 7 Nights. Before we begin, I'd like to ask for your help. Like the video, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. It's just one click, but it makes a huge difference in helping YouTube share the videos with more people and allowing me to keep bringing this content to you. I'm counting on you. Let's go to the video. There's something strange behind the story of basketball's greatest legends, and once you start connecting the dots, it's hard to ignore. I'm not talking about statistics or pure talent. I'm talking about a pattern. A pattern where extreme success always seems to come with a kind of consequence. Not just common injuries or planned retirements. I'm talking about abrupt falls, mental collapses, scandals, and sudden deaths. The question that lingers is it really just coincidence? As we dive deeper into this topic, what emerges is a theory that has circulated for years, almost always on the margins, but that refuses to disappear. The idea that some players, in order to achieve an almost superhuman level of fame and excellence, make symbolic pacts. Not in the literal sense of selling their souls like in old stories, but in a silent surrender, where something deep and essential is exchanged for recognition, sports immortality, and a place among the gods of the game. These pacts are not openly spoken about. They reveal themselves in the subtext. In strange interviews, sudden changes in behavior, and most importantly, in symbolic patterns that appear in almost ritualistic ways. Take, for example, the players who frequently say things like, "It was written," "It was my destiny," or "I had to sacrifice everything." Of course, many people use this as a figure of speech. But what if the words coincide with ancient symbols, tattoos, repeated hand gestures, and dates marked by tragedy? There is a little-known case outside the more attentive circles. Ben Wilson, considered the best high school player in the US in 1984. He had everything. He was young, talented, charismatic. Suddenly, he's killed in broad daylight at 17, in an episode that still raises questions. Some saw it as a tragedy of urban violence. Others, however, see it as the beginning of a dark pattern. The brighter the light, the faster it's extinguished. Was it a mistake or a price? The pattern repeats with different names in different eras. The faces change, but the structure is the same. Meteoric rise, idolization, and a downfall that seems inevitable. And in many cases, what comes after is even stranger. Health problems with no clear cause. Deep personality changes. Public statements that sound like cries for help. The question repeats itself. Is it just pressure, or the consequence of a silent pact being collected? And then there are the symbols. The number 33, triangles formed with fingers, eyes drawn in tattoos. Does it sound exaggerated? Maybe. But when these elements appear again and again, in the biggest names in the sport, it becomes impossible not to start questioning. Even major brand ad campaigns use words like sacrifice, rebirth, chosen. Is this all just marketing, or is something more being suggested? It's not just in basketball. The connection between sports and the music industry is strong. And in music, these theories about pacts and symbolism are already old. Jay-Z, for example, owner of one of the biggest sports agencies in the world, is a central figure in these conversations. And the athletes he represents? Almost all surrounded by a different kind of glow and the same suspicions. Could we be looking at a larger network where sports, fame, and invisible forces walk side by side? Some interviews leave subtle clues. Kevin Garnett, for example, once said that you need to sacrifice something big to become immortal in the NBA. It may have just been a figure of speech. But when you look at what's been happening with these players, the phrase takes on a new weight. What exactly is being sacrificed? And who decides what must be given? Many players, after their peak, collapse. Not just financially, but psychologically, spiritually. Some speak about a loss of identity, others disappear completely from the spotlight, and some will leave too soon. It's as if success had an expiration date, as if it were borrowed. When the invisible contract ends, what's left? There are also the intermediaries. People behind the scenes, agents, executives, figures who don't appear, but who control the paths. These people are the same ones who appear in different stories, in trajectories that follow the same script. What do they know? And why do they always seem to be nearby when the rise begins? And the dates, this part might be the most unsettling. Certain tragedies, farewells, and even historic debuts happen on the same days of the year. January, March, November. It could just be the sports calendar. But what if it isn't? What if these dates are purposely marked as part of something greater? In the end, what's most impressive is that all of this happens in front of everyone. Symbols, patterns, downfalls, phrases said in public. It's all there, but no one connects the dots. No one asks, so what is really behind the rise of these legends? Did they reach the top on their own? Or did someone open the path and collect afterward? Kobe Bryant was more than a player. He was a symbol of excellence, discipline, and an obsession with victory. From the start, his trajectory seemed written with an almost mystical precision. A teenager who went straight from high school to the NBA, and not only survived in that environment, but dominated it. And the further his career progressed, the more his image distanced itself from the ordinary. It was as if he was operating on another level, physical, mental, and even symbolic. The nickname Black Mamba, which he chose himself, was no accident. The mamba is one of the deadliest snakes in the world, silent, precise, lethal. But it is also an animal with a heavy symbolic load in various cultures, associated with transformation, death, and rebirth. Kobe said the mamba was his persona on the court, a way to deal with pressure and transform into something unbeatable. But was that symbol just a sports metaphor, or was there something more behind it? In 2016, when he retired, Kobe did something rare among former players. He didn't disappear. On the contrary, he seemed to be starting a new and even more ambitious phase. He published books, launched a production company, won an Oscar, and began working on projects related to youth and education, themes with powerful symbolic reach. Some saw this as a legacy. Others saw the beginning of a new mission. But why such a sudden, intense, and public shift? And this is where the story begins to take on unsettling contours. For years after his retirement, on January 26, 2020, Kobe died in a helicopter crash. The news stopped the world. The grief was global. But once the emotional dust settled, questions began to arise. The helicopter was a safe model, the pilot experienced, and the conditions, although not ideal, didn't fully justify the tragedy. What exactly happened that morning? One detail that fueled theories even more was the existence of an episode from the cartoon Legends of Chamberlain Heights, aired in 2016, in which a character named Kobe crashes in a helicopter and dies. The episode was removed shortly after the real-life tragedy. Coincidence? Maybe. But the timing and content were enough to reignite debates about predictions, hidden messages, and pre-programmed narratives. Was it just fiction, or part of a larger script? Additionally, in his final years, Kobe began to speak frequently about transcendence, spiritual balance, and reinvention. Terms that, for some, were just signs of maturity. But for others, they sounded like someone preparing for something, a transition. In interviews, he even said that life doesn't end when you stop playing, it just changes form. A powerful phrase, poetic, and strangely premonitory. Another curious point, the numerology surrounding Kobe is heavy. He wore the numbers 8 and 24. Adding 8 plus 24 gives us 32, a number with magical symbolism in various traditions, but also one that represents the division between worlds, according to some occult branches. The date of his death, January 26, 2020, also numerically repeats itself in various events involving tragedies with public figures. Coincidences? Perhaps. But how many coincidences are needed to form a pattern? There's also his relationship with technology. Kobe was involved with startups in augmented reality, encryption, and digital education, fields frequently mentioned in discussions about the future of humanity. For some theorists, his figure was becoming larger than sports, and that, in certain conspiratorial narratives, never goes unpunished. After all, how far can a legend grow without interfering with larger structures? And the choice of the helicopter as a means of transport was always seen as natural for him. But for those who observe the symbolism behind the deaths of public figures, the sky is often associated with divine downfall. When gods fall, it is from above. The very idea of falling from the sky carries a mythological weight. Was Kobe's end tied to this archetype? Not as a direct cause, but as part of a symbolic cycle. After his death, the foundation he created, the brands he was associated with, and the content he left behind remained in the spotlight. But something changed. The aura around Kobe became almost sacred, as if he had crossed the barrier between idol and entity. Fans don't just remember him, they revere him. And when someone's memory is treated as something above human, what exactly does that reveal about the impact that person had? What's most unsettling is that, despite everything that has already been said about Kobe, few touch on these points. His trajectory doesn't seem like that of just a brilliant man. It feels like the journey of a figure who fulfilled a carefully constructed cycle, with a beginning, a peak, and an almost mythological end. What did he know? And was his death just an accident, or the closing of a chapter written long before we ever imagined? Numbers, when they appear repeatedly in stories that have no direct connection to each other, are usually treated as coincidence. But when these repetitions accumulate over decades, involving different players, different events, and different contexts, it becomes impossible not to start questioning. The NBA is full of patterns that, at first glance, seem random. But as you begin to observe closely, something else emerges, a hidden code. Silent, precise. Dates are the first element that jump out. Many of basketball's greatest tragedies have occurred during specific times of the year, and these dates repeat in an almost ritualistic way. January 26th, for example, isn't just marked by the death of Kobe Bryant. In previous years, several players suffered serious injuries or announced major decisions during this same period. What is it about that day? Why does it reappear with such weight? Another example is the month of November. In 1991, Magic Johnson shocked the world by announcing he was HIV positive. The date? November 7th. Curiously, years later, another bombshell rocked the sports world. The suspension of Gilbert Arenas, also in November, after an internal scandal involving firearms. And that's not to mention the debut of several legendary names, including Kevin Durant, whose first games happened in the same month. Is it merely a coincidence of the league's calendar, or does November carry a deeper meaning? Repetitions also appear in jersey numbers. The number 23, immortalized by Michael Jordan, is more than a number, it's a symbol. And what's curious is how other elite players, like LeBron James, insist on wearing it as if inheriting a hidden identity. The number 33, worn by Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Scottie Pippen, and Patrick Ewing, has even older symbolic roots, tied to initiatory orders and concepts of spiritual elevation. Why, among hundreds of possibilities, do certain numbers concentrate so many decisive stories? There's also a curious numerical pattern involving career durations, the age at which tragedies occur, and historical sports milestones. Players retiring at 37, dying at 41, debuting at 19. And when you start listing these cases, the number of coincidences exceeds dozens. Are they just statistics? Maybe. But how do you explain the precise frequency with which these ages appear when something important happens? Even the scores have their secrets. Some of the most symbolic games in NBA history ended with numerical sums that, when cross-referenced with dates or players' jersey numbers, reveal chilling parallels. One example, Kobe Bryant's final game, in which he scored 60 points, ended 101-96. The sum of those numbers? 197. The exact number of days remaining in the year 2016 after his official retirement. Coincidence? Maybe. But this type of synchronicity happens too often to ignore. The locations of events also reinforce the theory. Many of the NBA's most iconic games or tragedies occurred in cities with strong symbolic meaning or esoteric history. Los Angeles, for example, besides being home to the Lakers, is a city filled with stories tied to occultism and the entertainment industry. Chicago, where Jordan built his legend, is frequently cited as one of the energy nodes of the U.S., according to theories about spiritual geography. Could the setting influence the script? Even the draft, the event where young players are selected by franchises, presents curious anomalies. In certain years, the top 3 picks had vastly different careers, as if only one had received the promise of glory. In 2003, LeBron James was the first pick, while Darko Milicic, the second, had a forgettable career. Chris Bosh, fourth on the list, shone for a time, then was forced into early retirement. What determines who receives the blessing and who becomes a footnote? The 1984 draft, considered one of the most legendary in history, brought together names like Michael Jordan, Hakeem Olajuwon, Charles Barkley, and John Stockton for future Hall of Famers, all entering the league in the same year. The probability of that happening naturally is low, very low, especially when you consider the impact each had on the game, as if that year had been carefully shaped to produce icons. And it's not just the players. Coaches, referees, and even franchise owners seem to enter and leave the league following an almost choreographed rhythm. Phil Jackson, known as the Zen Master, racked up titles in years when certain astrological conjunctions were active, something that, for skeptics, may sound absurd. But for those who analyze cycles, these repetitions are part of a larger pattern. The stats and numbers that once seemed like mere data points begin to take on a different meaning when aligned like pieces of a code. An invisible code, yet one that determines rhythms, rises, and downfalls. Whether this code is natural, psychological, or ritualistic is still up for debate, but it exists. And the question that won't go away is, who wrote this code and who keeps following it? Michael Jordan isn't just the greatest name in NBA history. He's a cultural icon, almost an entity. But what intrigues most about his journey isn't the peak, it's the disappearance. In 1993, at the absolute height of his career, right after winning his 3rd consecutive title with the Chicago Bulls, Jordan shocked the world by announcing his retirement. No injury, no scandal, no visible physical exhaustion. He just left. And the official explanation? I lost the passion for the game. Really? Shortly before that, his father, James Jordan, had been murdered under obscure circumstances. The car was found abandoned, the body discovered days later. The official version claimed it was a robbery, but to this day, the investigation has many holes. For many, the father's death was the breaking point. But the timing, the details, and Jordan's behavior after the crime raise another suspicion. Did it really all happen the way it was told? Behind the scenes of the NBA, the theory that Jordan was forced to step away began to gain traction. At the time, his name was linked to high-stakes gambling. He was frequently seen in casinos, and there were rumors of debts to powerful figures. The NBA, worried about the league's image, may have offered a silent deal, a temporary exit with no official punishment to protect the reputation of the game. But what if that's only part of the story? Some theorists go further. They suggest Jordan's departure was the fulfillment of a kind of symbolic clause, a sacrifice cycle that had to occur after 3 consecutive championships, something almost ritualistic. 3 titles, 3 years, 3 times at the top, and then silence. A price paid for having gone too far? A pause demanded by forces operating outside the game? During this time away from the NBA, Jordan pursued a baseball career, a sport his father loved. But his numbers were modest, and the decision always seemed disconnected from his identity. The image of the greatest basketball player in the world, wearing a baseball glove, never quite made sense. Not to those who knew his competitive hunger. And what if playing another sport was just a cover, a way to stay visible, while still obeying what had been decided? 2 years later, he returned. And not on just any day. Jordan announced his NBA comeback on March 18, 1995, with a simple fax that read, "I'm back." His first game was on the 19th, the 82nd day of the year. The number 82 represents the total games in a regular NBA season. A timed coincidence or a message? Was that date chosen at random, or was it the exact moment when he was allowed to return? Upon his return, Jordan wore number 45 instead of his traditional 23. And only after a few games did he switch back to the original number. Number 45 was what he wore in baseball, but it also holds symbolism. In some occult traditions, the number 45 represents transition, rebirth, a restart under new rules. He came back, but did he return the same? Throughout his career, Jordan was extremely private off the court. Few deep interviews, rare spontaneous public appearances. And even now, decades after his final retirement, his presence is still marked by silence, as if something has always been left unsaid. Someone with so much impact, so much influence, and yet so little deeply explored. Is that a personal choice, or part of a more carefully crafted structure? The documentary The Last Dance, released in 2020, reignited fascination with his journey. But even there, everything seemed perfectly scripted. Nothing felt truly raw. What was shown is what he wanted to show. And that precise construction raises another question. How much does Jordan really control his own narrative? And how much is he following a script written long ago? It's also curious that, throughout his career, Jordan never suffered a serious injury. An athlete who played with maximum intensity for over a decade, practically unscathed. That's rare. Very rare. And when talking about symbolic pacts, the absence of physical consequences may indicate that the price was paid elsewhere, psychologically, spiritually, more subtly. His titles, his influence, his cultural impact, everything about Jordan feels meticulously calculated, as if his story had been written before it was lived. And that, more than any theory, is what's truly unsettling. Because when everything seems so perfect, was it really just talent? Not every legend ends in glory. Some simply disappear, not from the memory of fans, but from the system. Players who, at one point, seemed unstoppable, brilliant, inevitable, and suddenly turned into silence. It's in that void, that abrupt fading of light, where some of basketball's strangest stories hide. Allen Iverson is the first name that comes to mind. At his peak, he was the pure embodiment of rebellion and raw talent. Small by NBA standards but huge in attitude, Iverson didn't conform to expectations, he shattered them. Yet, the more he challenged the system, the more his career began to crumble. Not because of a lack of skill. He was still one of the best on the court, but doors began to close. Contracts vanished. Opportunities disappeared. It was as if someone or something had pressed an invisible button. What's curious is that Iverson, throughout his career, let slip statements loaded with meaning. In one interview, he said, "There are things I'll never be able to tell, even if I wanted to." What does that mean? What kind of information did someone like him carry that couldn't be spoken out loud? And why did he, among so many others, seem to suffer a kind of selective ostracism? Rodman, on the other hand, took a different path, the path of excess. But if you look closely, the pattern is the same. On the court, he was a beast of defense, rebounding, intensity. Off the court, an enigma. Colored hair, controversial political friendships, bizarre public appearances. But all of that started after he hit his peak. As if his mind was trying to escape something, or as if he was being molded to appear insane, discredited. He once said, "Not everyone survives what comes after fame." And when asked what exactly he meant, he looked away and changed the subject. That's not just eccentricity, that's protection. Those who lived behind the scenes of the league know Rodman saw what few ever did. And the way he was gradually pushed out of the spotlight wasn't natural. It was controlled. There are also those who simply faded away. Penny Hardaway, Grant Hill, Brandon Roy, all almost messianic promises, all ending their careers much earlier than expected. Injuries can explain part of it, but in some cases, diagnoses were rare, causes poorly explained. Some say these players broke the cycle. They didn't follow the script, didn't accept what was required. And when that happens, the system responds. The theory among the more observant is simple: there's a limit. An invisible space where only those aligned with the model are allowed. And those who don't adapt, who question, who shout, are removed. Some slowly, others suddenly. There are no public scandals, because there doesn't need to be. Silence is the most effective punishment. Latrell Sprewell is another case that raises suspicion. An explosive player, full of talent and charisma, whose career ended practically in exile. It all started with an incident where he attacked a coach. But what few remember is that days before, he had made strong statements about how the game was being manipulated by forces outside of basketball. After that, his image was destroyed. Coincidence or reaction? Other less media-friendly athletes also vanished without a clear explanation. Sebastian Telfair, for example, once considered one of the greatest high school prospects, never managed to establish a solid career. Off-court issues were cited as the reason. But in more recent interviews, he hints that something was off, something he couldn't control. A player who was prepared, trained, ready, and still blocked. The league doesn't need to expel someone publicly to silence them. A chain of decisions is enough. An unrenewed contract, a poorly treated injury, a negative media narrative, and that's it. The image fades. Gradually, the player stops being remembered for what they did and becomes defined by what they could have been. That's how forgetting is built. What's most striking is how these names, even after being erased from the spotlight, remain alive in the collective imagination. There's something unfinished about them, as if the public senses the story was cut in half. And that feeling that something was ended without explanation only fuels the theory that these falls weren't natural, they were executed. Basketball, like any power structure, chooses its heroes. And it also chooses who will disappear. Those who fit are immortalized. Those who refuse vanish. And when you look at the number of talents who were silenced before their time, the question stops being why, and becomes, how many more will disappear before we even notice? Most people see basketball courts as spaces of competition, sweat, and perseverance. But what if, behind the neatly painted lines, the gleaming logos, and the spotlights, there's something more? Something that can't be perceived just by watching a game. Something that has been carefully built over decades, with a symbolic architecture invisible to the common eye. Arenas like the Staples Center, the United Center, and Madison Square Garden aren't just sports venues. They're modern temples. Their structures, locations, and even inauguration dates contain geometric forms and patterns that, to experts in symbolism and esoteric architecture, indicate a design. It's common to see repeated hexagonal shapes, lighting patterns based on the number 12, or entrances oriented towards specific sunset points. Is that just style or intention? At the Staples Center, where Kobe Bryant built his legend, there's a little-noticed detail. The number of stairs and internal steps aligns with proportions known as the golden ratio, a pattern associated with perfection and harmony in ancient cultures. The arrangement of the lights on the main court, when viewed from above, also forms a figure resembling the all-seeing eye. Coincidence? Maybe. But why does this symbol also appear on other teams' courts, with slight variations? Team logos also tell their own story. The Bulls logo, when inverted, resembles the face of a demonic robot sitting on an altar. Does that sound like a stretch? Maybe. But this theory has circulated for years and has been a topic of discussion in forums dedicated to hidden messages in sports culture. The Brooklyn Nets logo features clean, circular lines, with a ball in the center that echoes the symbolism of 19th century European secret society crests. None of this is proven, but it's all right there in plain sight. It's not just about images. It's the behavior surrounding them. Major league decisions like trades, billion-dollar contracts, and franchise relocations are often announced on dates significant to the occult calendar. The draft itself, the event that defines the league's future, has been held on dates tied to equinoxes, lunar cycles, and even ancient religious celebrations. Is that just logistics, or are these dates chosen for deeper meaning? In addition, there are reports of discrete rituals taking place behind the scenes. Initiation ceremonies for rookies, secret meetings in luxury hotels, and gatherings in closed locations with figures not officially connected to the sports structure. Players who rise to stardom quickly often pass through these encounters before their media explosion. And those who refuse to participate simply fade away. There are also records of meetings between franchise owners and members of discrete organizations. Elite clubs, ancient brotherhoods, groups with political and economic ties. Nothing is shown directly, but the patterns are visible. Some franchise decisions make commercial sense. Others don't. Name changes, complete visual rebrands, entire overhauls with no apparent reason. Could they be following something outside the league's rules? According to these theorists, the courts are more than physical spaces. They are stages. Stages for modern rituals, where energy, devotion, and idolatry are channeled through entertainment. The players are central figures, chosen not only for their skill, but for their symbolic profile, family history, or even the energy they carry. Are they just athletes, or conduits for something greater? The presence of certain symbols on the courts also doesn't seem accidental. Words painted along the sidelines, like unity, equality, power, are heavy with intention. In times of social transformation, these words act as emotional anchors. But they could also serve a greater narrative, where each game reinforces specific messages on a subconscious level. Are these events shaping more than opinions? Are they shaping consciousness? Another point that raises questions is the emotional synchronicity of major games. Why are so many finals decided in the last seconds? Why do the storylines of certain seasons seem pre-written before the ball is even tipped? Is there sports manipulation? Perhaps. But what if, beyond that, there's a symbolic script being followed? One that demands balance, drama, sacrifice, and consecration. Basketball, like other mass cultural expressions, has the power to unite, move, influence, and transform. But that power, in the wrong hands or within invisible structures, can become something dangerous. The lingering question is, if the game we see isn't just about baskets and victories, then what exactly are we watching? The journey of these basketball legends reveals more than talent and perseverance. It exposes hidden layers, repeating patterns, and signs that were in plain sight all along but rarely questioned. From silent pacts to dates loaded with meaning, from symbols hidden on the court to sudden, unexplained downfalls, everything points to a larger, subtle, and silent mechanism that shapes the fate of those who dare to reach the unreachable. And once the top is reached, the game changes, and what once was glory may become debt. This story is just one piece, and one day, maybe you'll see the whole puzzle. If this made you think, subscribe and like the video. It helps the channel grow. Don't forget to share it. After all, more voices mean more discoveries.